When I was a kid, I would...
just keep going.
Okay. Sorry, Sammy. I knew that was going to happen regardless. All right. When I was a kid, I would have these recurring dreams, nightmares, would you? Where I would be crawling through those plastic tunnels at McDonald's or Burger King or what have you. I'd be crawling through, and slowly they'd be getting smaller and smaller. And eventually I would get stuck with no hope, no way out of the situation. And it was a dream that I would have over and over again. I've even had it a couple times as an adult. I've had a couple of real life moments where I felt like I was actually stuck in one of those with my kids. But that was just a dream. But there are times in regular life where it's easy to feel like there's no way out. It's easy to feel like there's no hope. No possible way that a situation could be redeemed. For many of us, this year or even this life has been full of challenges. General disappointment, maybe plans that you made that haven't gone through. Experiencing real and tragic loss. Various mental health challenges that have been ignited through this year. Maybe a general feeling of being unheard or invalidated. Maybe experiencing different hurt from others. Or challenging and new family dynamics. And even as I say this, we're entering into another period of isolation, which can bring about more loss and new challenges. You know, when it feels like there's no hope, when it feels like there's no way out, we must believe that God will see us through. God will see us through. We must believe that because God is always at work. God being at work, though, of course, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be okay. God being at work doesn't mean that there's not going to be pain, or it doesn't mean that others won't sin against me. And it certainly doesn't mean that I won't experience tragedy or loss. It means that God is working to bring about a glory that goes beyond what I can see, that goes beyond what I can imagine in a particular scenario. It's trusting that God is at work and doing things even if I'm unaware and can't see it. God is always at work. In John chapter 5, verse 17, as Jesus is being challenged on helping and serving others during the Sabbath, his response is, "My Father's always at work to this very day, and I too am working." He goes, my dad is always at work. The Father, God, is always at work. And today we're going to look at the story of Ruth. And the story of Ruth, it's so clear that God is always at work, that God is working, that God is seeing Ruth and her family through significant tragedy and loss. You know, Ruth is a love story kind of smack dab in the middle of Israelite history. It's just 4 chapters long. But as we're finishing as a church, or beginning rather, or in the middle of our series, the journey from Judges to Jesus. Joshua to Jesus, going through and journeying through the Old Testament and looking at times where the storyline of Jesus is brought to life in the Old Testament, leading up to Christmas, when we celebrate Jesus coming down here to earth and coming down to be a part of our life. So today we're going to do that by looking at Ruth and seeing how God was at work in the story of Ruth. And the reason it's so interesting is, unlike many other books of the Bible, of the Old Testament in particular, the story of Ruth doesn't necessarily address God doing something directly. That God, unlike other stories in the Old Testament where God parts the Red Sea, or he does something, or sends a storm, or sends a whale, or does certain things, in the story of Ruth, God is working in the background. And though the players in the story are aware of God and how he's at work, it's not always clear. But the story has this overarching narrative that points to how God is always at work. So if there's anything you get from this morning, it's that God is always at work. So let's read or talk through the book of Ruth together. That through our ups and downs, God is working. We're going to start off in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "In those days, when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab to live there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. We'll stop there. So in this story, things kick off with tragedy. It starts off with a famine, with challenge. As they experience the famine, this one family, Elimelech and his wife Naomi with their 2 sons, they leave and they go to enemy territory. And they live in Moab. And there, Naomi experiences greater loss with the loss of her husband. And then her 2 sons, they get married to Moabite women, which you weren't really supposed to do, but they went ahead and did in these trying times. And then they both ended up dying. And so then it was Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law, and all of them had experienced loss. Naomi, worst of all, her husband and her 2 sons. She had experienced significant tragedy. But in this story, Naomi is not the focus. It's actually Ruth, one of the women that married, one of the daughters-in-law of Naomi. So let's pick up in verse 16. Because Naomi, what she does is she said, you know what, girls? You don't need to come back. You don't need to come with me to Israel. You're going to be foreigners. You're already widows. Now you're going to be foreigners. It's not going to go well. Why don't you guys stay here where you're comfortable? You'll be safe here. You can find a new husband. But if you don't owe me anything. And Orpah says, one of the other daughters-in-law, she says, you make a good point. I'm out of here. But Ruth says, no, I'm going to stick with you. Where you go, I'm going to go. Your God will be my God. And so she sticks with Naomi. And this is what she says in verse 16. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Talk about loyalty and boldness. So Ruth and Naomi, they head back to Israel. And the future is unknown, but at least for Ruth, she's doing what she can. You know, she stands out, just like the judges in the previous book. Different individuals that stand out because of their faith and their loyalty to God and his teaching. And that's what Ruth did. As she probably married into this family, she learned about the Israelite God, and she's emulating his character through her loyalty. So she goes in chapter 2, she's gleaning in the fields, and she ends up working in the field of this man named Boaz. And she's trying to collect the leftover grain, and she certainly sticks out as a foreigner, kind of in this community, as a widow. Her story would have been known around her. So she's going through the fields, and then Boaz sees her. And it's like, ooh, dream weaver. He just sees her. He goes, who is that woman? And he goes and hears her story. And he's like, he pulls her aside and he says, hey, don't just glean here. Why don't you follow these guys? I'm going to show you the best place to get the best grain. I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to take care of you because I've heard your story and I want to help. And then Ruth goes, hold on, why are you showing me this favor? I'm a foreigner. I'm lowly. Why are you showing me such affection? And his response is in chapter 2, verse 11, as we're going through the story here. In Ruth chapter 2, verse 11, it says this. Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And she's touched by this and she appreciates it. But Boaz essentially says, your loyalty has preceded you. I've heard of your tale, your faith. you're trusting in God, and it is attractive. He's like, there's something about this girl. It's like she's got it going on. There's something here about her trust in God, and it's drawing him to her, which is really cool. And Ruth demonstrates in this story what trusting God amongst tragedy can look like. As she is willing to serve her mother-in-law, she's willing to work in the fields, to do whatever she can to be loyal to God and loyal to her mother-in-law here. She demonstrates what trusting in God can look like. We can see it through, whatever the situation is, because God sees us through. I've asked Elena to share a little bit about how she connects with the story of Ruth, how Ruth trusts that God will see us through, and Elena's going to share about, again, how she can relate to this story and the idea of trusting in God in every circumstance.